Hello, 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 and welcome to a brand new episode of Potstilled Live, which is the Dingle Distillery Takeover for the single pot still batch number 5. As always, I'm your host, Matt Healy from Potstilled.com, and this evening I am delighted to be welcoming back to the show two of our fine guests from Dingle Distillery, Master Distiller Graham Coull, of course, International Brand Ambassador Alan Glynn. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, yeah. And it's good to see that Alan and me coordinated our wardrobes tonight.
Hi, Graham. Graham knows I love an old check shirt, so he's just trying to be me more than anything at this point.
He's beat me into it. I obviously now think it's young and trendy to be in the check shirt, but I don't go for the open shirt yet, but maybe next time.
I also think it's fantastic that you think I'm young and trendy.
Oh, you're younger than me.
But is he trendier than you? That's the question.
Maybe I should do a poll and find out.
Exactly. I am delighted to have you both here this evening, guys. We have tons of people on with us already. I know that over 250 phenomenal tasting packs have gone out, packed by the phenomenal team you have down in Dingle. We're going to have a lot of fun going through that, talking about the single pot still batch number 5, which is the final release in the numbered series for the single pot still, which is obviously a big occasion. But in the comment section, I'm seeing people from all over the world. I'm seeing people in Cove, Ennis, Austria, and we're going then to Antrim Coast, Dublin, Carlow, Clonakilty, Hungary, Zoltan Bari dropping in there. We have a good representation here from Germany, and we're all the way back. And then, of course, we have a ton of people in Dingle and Sneem watching as well. So a lot of people here already. Very excited to be tasting some good, fine single pot still Irish whiskey with some new make and some malt thrown in as well, I believe, Graham. It is going to be a lot of fun. Remember, in the comment section, guys, let us know what your questions are. You've got the makers and the flavor creators sitting in front of you on the screen. We are here to answer your questions and also have a really good time. So there's going to be some slagging. There's no doubt, if any of you have watched these before, you will know that there will be slagging of a compatriot of both Graham and Alan's in the comment section as well. That is of Doug Ledden. They're not just picking on a random person. Excuse me. If you don't know the joking that goes on in the distillery. But before I choke myself here on nothing, why don't we try and open bottle number A or letter A in this phenomenal pack we have here. And Graham, why don't you give us a little bit of an insight of what's in the bottle, and then we can have a chat once everyone has a little bit of liquid in the glass.
Yeah, so it's, if you're looking at the pack just with your eyes, it's obviously the odd one out because there's absolutely no colour to it. So this is makes it easy to spot even if there was no letter A on it. It's the new make spirit, and because it's a pot still release that we're talking about tonight, it's obviously pot still new make. So I think it's one of the first times we've probably had the pot still new make out there for people to try, and it's something I find is getting a lot more popular these days. In fact, there's a crusade for new make to be sold, I think, by certain individuals. But I don't know if we need to go that far, but it definitely is a chance to enjoy new make. And I think with the releases, the ages that Dingle releases are just now, it's nice to compare and contrast. You know, you're far enough apart. You know, the release is coming in at 7-8 years old now, so you've got a bit of distance between the two. So you can appreciate the new spirit from the distillery, and then hopefully as we go through the tasting, you'll appreciate the maturity that the cask has brought as well.
Somebody's
Absolutely.
asking.
Before we do dive into the glasses, I'm wondering what ABV is the first sample we're going to try, just as people to stick their noses into it.
So it's 65%. So that's a little touch under what it would come off naturally off the still. Triple distilled spirit coming off the still comes off at near 80% alcohol at Dingle. So we take that down a little, and you might think why'd you bother? But taking it down that 15% ABV by adding water, it basically means that the liquid will interact with the wood better than water soaks into wood better than alcohol. So bringing it down is good, but you obviously don't want to come too far down. Otherwise, you'll have issues in the future. If it's very old, then the strength naturally drops as it matures. So 65, 63, 65. Some will go a little higher, but it just helps the maturation process.
Absolutely. Alan, for those sitting at home with this phenomenal, I suppose, 2-box pack, what are the lucky 250 plus people looking at in their boxes in front of them before we kick off? And I'm going to have a little nose of this new make while you tell us.
Yeah, have a look. So obviously we become very well known for the amazing effort and the work that goes into the packs that we have there, and we always want to bring something very special. So along with the 4 samples that we have for tonight that we're going to get tucked into, everybody has a candle that actually is coming from Dingle Crystal. So they've actually reworked the bottles, they've recycled the bottles, and they've done some beautiful etchings on the glass. You can see as Matt is fantastically presenting it there as I'm speaking. And then the candle itself is a vanilla oak scented candle that's going to bring through the aromas of whiskey, of malt whiskey into your home. So even if you wanted to light it up there now, you'll have that aroma all around us. On top of that, you have 2 of our special Dingle tasting glasses, our copas. We've used them in packs before, but we know like there's a lot of new people here, and everybody loves to have that good tasting glass at home for when we're doing these things. And then we've got our 2 coaster slates as well with our Dingle branding. So everything was to kind of bring a little bit of kind of, again, we always talk about trying to bring Dingle and trying to bring Kerry to the world. It's a part of that as well. Bringing the stone coming from Kerry, bringing the candle from Dingle Crystal, and bringing the whiskey to life aromatically around you too.
Absolutely fantastic. I don't want to make people jealous around me, but my candle actually came with a spare cork in it, which I've learned is quite unique. So I don't want to make people too jealous, but I did get an extra cork in my pack. So just so you know, this job comes with perks, 3 corks. No, I'm delighted. Doug has asked me to use the cork to light the candle at some point, so maybe I'll make a TikTok out of that or something. But I'm delighted. This is a phenomenal candle. And I mean, the glass in itself, Adam and Dingle Crystal, obviously doing himself great in the bespoke bottoms of the bottle. You're certainly not confused as to where it comes from. So I'm sure. Let us know in the comment section if you have lit your candle, or if you are cracking into any of these whiskeys with your lovely Tua made copas and your slate coasters as well. So Graham, why don't you tell us a little bit about this Potstilled? Is there a defined mash bill that goes into it, and how have you enjoyed making the Potstilled in the distillery?
Yeah, Potstilled is, I won't assume people know everything about Potstilled, because it's a slightly different spirit. It's a spirit unique to Ireland, not made anywhere else. And the uniqueness comes from the ingredients, the raw materials, the cereals that are combined. So, single malt is easy to speak about. It's very straightforward. It contains malted barley and that's it. Whereas Potstilled, there's a bit more artistic license available to add in unmalted cereals. Now, that mash bill, as it's called, is still a little tight at the moment. Generally, it's malted barley and unmalted barley, and you can add 5% other cereals in there, which could be rye or oats, etc. But in the future, that will actually open up a little bit more. But the Dingle Potstilled, obviously, it's been made to the technical file as it is now, as it was written, is made up of 60% malted barley and 40% unmalted barley, and that's a fair chunk. That 40% brings with it a different character, even to the new spirit. We've not got it tonight, but if you had the single malt new make spirit in front of you, there would be slight differences, slight nuances that you would pick up, even obviously at that early stage.
And for people sticking their nose into this glass, there's a lovely aromatic quality, especially at 65. It's creamy, sweet. Can you give us a little walkthrough on what in your opinion, this I suppose smells and tastes like, and what of the characters of the distillery as well? Is there a commonality you see between the malt and the Potstilled? Are they quite sweet or floral, or or are they quite different all across the range?
I think that in some ways they're similar because although the raw materials are slightly different, the process is identical. So the mashing process, fermentation time, distillation, triple distillation, all those parameters are identical. So within that, you do have similarities. You do have that fruitiness and that citrus notes which are dominant. But I think for me, what comes through in the Potstilled is, as you mentioned, that creaminess. It's a creaminess on the nose. It's hard to put words to it, like ice cream soda. It definitely has a softer nose than single malt new make, and I also get a bit of almost like a minty humbugs kind of style to it as well. Coming off, it's quite fresh and zesty as well. And then if you're brave enough to taste it, because bear in mind it is 65%, so you could water it down, but I think that's where that creamy mouthfeel comes through, and then you've got the for me the traditional herbal spice that comes through with Potstilled as well, which you won't necessarily pick up so much in a single malt new make spirit.
And if in terms of you were talking about your mash bill recipe there, there are obviously parameters, as you mentioned, that go into what you can and can't call a single pot still. But was there a long testing process to find that specific mash bill? Is that something that you tried and you were quite happy with? I suppose, how does one in the realm of possibilities of all the different percentages of those grains you're using, I suppose, land on one that you're happy with?
Yeah, I think obviously there's permutations you can play with, but sometimes you are driven by the ingredients that you're using. Malted barley is the thing that will give most of the extract, most of the sugar, and therefore most of the alcohol. So to make it worth your while, you do need to have a high percentage of malted barley in there. So at least a minimum of 50% would really probably be the feasible option. And if you go a little higher, then all the better. The unmalted barley needs all the help it can get because it's a raw cereal. It's not refined. It's not been processed in any way to make the starch accessible. So you have to work harder to get the starch from that barley. So the 60-40 is quite a nice compromise to get the best of both worlds out of it.
Absolutely, and I'm seeing the comment section agreeing with me. Incredibly flavoursome. I'm seeing a lot of people commenting on a large amount of fruit coming through in this as well. Citrus peel, floral, absolutely delicious. And Alan, from your world in brand ambassador, and then of course in looking on trade in the bar scenes, are the people getting more interested out and about the new makes coming from distilleries and their usability?
Yeah, definitely. Like to look at what people are doing and the rate of with mixology and everything out there, people are always looking for something new because they can develop their drinks around. Like, gone is the day of like just any old whiskey will make a whiskey cocktail. You're really looking to kind of pair in the flavorings of the drink you're trying to make to extenuate and bring forward the flavorings within the spirit that's in it. So the more variety, the more things we can give, the more flavor we can offer, the more kind of fruitiness, boldness, everything that we talk about in whiskeys, the more they get to work with and bring new exciting drinks. Like, you can make an old fashioned with any whiskey, but the trick is, if you're going to make an old fashioned with particular whiskey, how are you going to make that whiskey shine, and how are you going to bring it forward and do everything you can with it to really make it be special and to show its character within the drink.
Absolutely. And if you were given the run of the bar now and you were told to throw this together in a cocktail, where are you going with a nice 65% fruity new make?
Well, I think because a new make being a new make, it has that kind of fruitiness, especially in our new make, because that, like as Graham has spoken about in tastings before and what we're doing, we have more of a kind of a fruitier style of new make with our 72-hour fermentation brings through that flavor and brings through the kind of sweeter notes. But with a Potstilled, because it has that kind of bit of green, it has that bit of kind of freshness, anything to kind of fresh, citrusy, kind of fruity style of drinks, even something to like a whiskey sour-esque type of drink will really shine through in this, because it'll bring a freshness that maybe you're not going to get out of, if you're looking at the new make in particular, you're not going to get it out of an aged whiskey. You're going to have some of that freshness come away into more of a kind of a smooth kind of note. So it'll definitely carry through a lot more with kind of fresher style, kind of sours, kind of fruity, citrusy styles of drinks.
Fantastic. I mean, quite apt. People may not realize, but you are sitting in the Dingle Whiskey Bar next to Porterhouse. So should we get or thirsty later on? I'm sure there's ingredients behind the bar that could be put together in a cocktail. Should you be pushed later on after the show?
No problem at all. Everybody knows where I am. You can come find me. At least I'm not hiding this time, so it's okay.
Exactly. I suppose in terms of Dingle, the pot still is being made in the distillery, and then it goes into, I suppose, maturation, where it goes from this into some of the more darkly colored variants that we have in our pack today. I suppose, Graham, do you want to talk us through what I suppose the casking looks like in Dingle in terms of a plan for the pot still, and then maybe we'll segue through into the actual sample number B or letter B.
Yeah, so pot still, obviously we make pot still, we make new make. Pot still probably makes up about 30% of our annual production, which in bottle terms just now would be around about 80,000 bottles. Now, to put this release in perspective, this release is around about 8,000 bottles. So obviously we're using stock from a few years ago, from small origins at Dingle, and it's now becoming a bigger part of our portfolios. So we started making pot still in 2014, was the earliest that we made pot still. So it was slightly later in. The distillery started in December 12. So it's slightly later into the distillery life cycle that we started pot still. And we've now reached pot still release 5. So we've had 5 releases so far. And very much the pot still follows along similar lines to single malt in terms of what cask styles we put it in, because for me, Dingle is we're still learning what Dingle is like. Now we're learning what Dingle will be like in 10 years' time, 10 years old, 12 years old. So it's very much, for me, beneficial to have the pot still and the single malt in similar cask styles that we can then compare and contrast and see how they are alongside each other. So for that reason, pot still follows our kind of cask backbone of bourbon, sherry and port being the main cask styles that we use, and then around about 10% of the other casks that we use are a little bit more. I won't use the word experimental because it's not really experimental, but they're more unique casks and possibly casks that will not appeal to everybody and be more interesting to some than others. Exactly.
And I presume some of those casks as well you'd be able to put away for your back pocket as a blender in terms of adding a touch of whatever sweetness or dryness or fortified wine to tail end of something if you need it as well. It won't always be a unique release on its own. I'm presuming there's a usability and versatility to those other casks.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've come through the period of combining cask styles up till now, and there was good reason for that. It was getting a bit of everything from each cask, and each cask helped each other. We're now moving into a phase of more releasing single cask styles, because we can evolve an age where that cask style can shine through on its own. But then as you get a little bit older, that's when you'll start playing around with maybe combining wine casks with bourbon, or wine cask with port, and seeing how they work together. And obviously finishing as well is another thing to bring in.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite everyone to start pouring bottle letter B. Alan, why don't you give us a little insight into, I suppose, where Potstilled came from and its uniquely Irishness as we're doing this, and we can kind of interlude into B this way.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's always something that for my years and years of working in bars and working in this trade and learning about whiskey, learning about whiskey, it was always something like the difference between single malts and pot stills and single grains and everything. We're always something to kind of understand and to better understand. And everybody would always explain pot still, but it was always something that never copped to me until I actually heard the story and the history and what it makes it uniquely Irish. So pot still has a geographic indicator. It's a GI to Ireland. So making pot still in Ireland is like making cognac in the cognac region of France. You can only do it here. And the way I always describe it is pot still, it was born of two of the greatest Irish characters, stubbornness and rebelliousness. Back in the day when we had a few visitors from across the Irish Sea, Irish whiskey was really starting to gain popularity. We'd already seen poutine start to go in Ireland, and Irish whiskey was the evolution of poutine into aging. And it started to really grow, and people started to really get involved with small local producers, people that would have been working in small country towns. You might have had one particular guy making the whiskey for everybody. They'd supply the grain, he'd make the whiskey. And this is where our kind of modern day distilleries came from. But as it started to grow, the English started to look at the fact that they could make some money. They could look at taxation, and they tried to tax the whiskey leaving the distilleries. But the problem was, if they were running their distilleries, and if you worked there in these times, when you finished your week's work, I would have handed you a bottle of whiskey. You'd go down to the local store and you'd trade it, you'd barter, you'd get money, you'd get credit, you'd get something in return, and they could sell that on. So if I was running my distillery tomorrow and I had 10 employees, well, I was telling the taxman I was giving away 20 bottles because I didn't want to pay the tax on it. So the taxman kind of copped onto this, and they kind of said, right, well, we're going to change up what we're doing here. How about instead of taxing the whiskey leaving the distillery, we start taxing the malted grain going into the distillery? And the Irish lads went, right, you can do it, but you know what? We're just not going to use malted grain. We're going to start using unmalted grain. So they started using unmalted grain in the mash bills to create pot still, really out of just being, like I said, stubborn and rebellious, because they didn't want to be paying tax. They didn't want to do what they were told. And they just created their whole our own category of whiskey, which we can take to the world.
Absolutely. So we've, I suppose, our own versions of whiskey here is bourbon in the States, and I suppose single malt Scotch has become synonymous with Scotland. Now, I do have one question I need to get to. Not only was it on my bank to get to, I see Faye has pulled it up here. Faye's also given it to Graham. I've also got a text from Doug, and I've also got a text from about 3 other people asking the exact same question. So, Vanessa, I am going to get to your question right this second. Vanessa wants to know, as she's not that deep into whiskey making, but she is into whiskey drinking, is the recipe for the new make the same for every pot still, or does it differ batch to batch? Now, obviously, Graham, that's a question for you, and I'm excited to hear your response.
Yeah, I think in the main it has stayed the same. You know, the 60% malted barley and 40% unmalted has been pretty much a standard. But obviously through the years as well, we have trialed different ratios, and obviously introduced some rye and some oats along the way as well. Now the pot still is they're still quite young, so they'll be a year or two before they would see the light of day as a mature whiskey. So a bit like everything we do here, you know, the majority is the same, but we play around at the edges with other things or other recipes. The distillation process remains pretty much untouched, but I have actually squeezed out some double distilled pot still without telling anybody too much. So there is a little of that kicking about, which I'll probably be looking for a job tomorrow after saying that. But
exactly, first piece of malt and now double distilled pot still. What are you doing down there, Graham? You'd be giving Elliot Hughes a heart attack next.
Yeah.
And then I suppose more in terms of production, you have that fun in the fringe levels and fringe edges as well. But I suppose the day-to-day consistency is king as well. So, you know, if you've got whatever it might be, 7 or 8 year old pot still now, and people are buying that, there's some level of consistency for that legacy stock coming through behind it as well.
Yeah, I think, you've seen it on our single malt side. We've got what we call our Dingle single malt, which is a core release. That's a consistent release that's available, well, certainly for the foreseeable future. You need to have that to offer to the markets. You can't, it's very difficult to do batch releases, limited releases all the time. The nature of chopping and changing and trying to get new products to market is, you have to jump through the hoops again. So to kind of gain ground and gain stability, you do need to have some kind of consistency there. And we will see that with the Potstilled as well. This is our final batch release, but maybe in a year or two's time, there'll be a standard Potstilled offering which will be available, year in, year out.
Absolutely.
Matt, I can also attest that the only difference between the single malt and the Potstilled is there's a bit more grain in the Potstilled. So magically, anytime I have gone down that I have had to, for those unaware, everything we do by hand, if I have had to actually jump in a mash tun and dig it out, magically it's always on the Potstilled when there's more to do.
Well, there you go. Look, they're thinking you're getting soft in the Dublin office, Alan. They're having none of it. You Swan coming in, going to Dick Max or on Drucken Biog. It's not all brand ambassador life there. I'm glad to hear they put you to work down there.
They put me to work, don't worry.
We just don't want him growing out of that shirt, You can hardly tie it as it is, so we have to keep him.
Well, we could get Doug to do it, but we'll never find him once he gets in.
There you go. I see Vanessa has thanked you for the explanation, and not a problem, Vanessa. In my over 2 years of running live streams, I've never had more people contact me about a question. So it was a very, very well wanted question. So I'm glad we got to it. Paul McDermott is asking the minimum amount of unmalted barley percentages we can use to still be called Potstilled, and that comes in that 30%. The 30% malt minimum, 30% unmalted minimum, and the current legislation is a maximum of 5% other grains, although that has been put to the Department of Agriculture to change to be a maximum of 30. Martin Savage is asking about the grain sources. Are you looking at all Irish grains, and are there areas in which you prefer other grain qualities, or are you working with maltsters, or I suppose what's your preferred way of working with different grains?
Yeah, I can be very political here and say all our unpeated malted barley has come from Ireland. I did have to venture across the sea to pick up some peated malted barley, but hopefully that there will be a more local source of that. All comes. There's nothing growing on the Dingle Peninsula, unfortunately. If you've ever been on the Dingle Peninsula, you don't see fields of barley. You see sheep and a few cows.
Exactly. I think in the 50s there was a couple of hectares of barley for malting, and that was about it, and it kind of died out at that point from my memory. But I say hopefully there'll be more local sources of peated malt, but unfortunately it looks like the ban on peat cutting and sale might put an end to the burgeoning peated malt industry in Ireland, which is unfortunate. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see that not come to fruition. A lot of people coming through here. D. Finn saying that the core range single malt from Dingle is too drinkable. I agree. I had a bottle. I would have had it behind me, except it's gone. I absolutely love that core range release. So why don't we talk a little bit about what's in the glass now in B. This is a phenomenal nose on this in particular. Can you break down for us, Graham, what is the new batch, and what are we tasting in this glass?
Yeah, so in many ways it's a very simple and straightforward whiskey. It's for me, it's whiskey in its simplest form because it's matured only in bourbon casks, which would still be by volume the most traditionally used cask in mature whiskey and Scotch whiskey as well. So it gives all the characteristics that you expect from whiskey, and from a bourbon cask, the one thing you'll notice, this isn't dark in color at all. It's a very light gold, straw gold, and that's as far as you get in bourbon cask. It might go a little deeper, but it won't gain much color now, because this is now the cask are between 7 and 8 years old in here. They've picked up the majority of their color. Bourbon casks for me allow the spirit to shine through. They'll never mask the spirit in terms of the character. So everything that, or not everything that you've nosed or tasted in the new make, but hopefully all the good bits that you get from the new make are still there in this whiskey, and hopefully some of them are accentuated a little bit more. So your fruity, creamy character is hopefully developed, and with bourbon casks, the traditional character coming through with them is vanilla. So that it's a lovely sweet caramel type flavor, which if you overlay with the spirit character, it works very well.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but on the nose, it's very expressive, but it almost kind of like a lemon curd, lemon sherbet, kind of sherbety, but there's something creamy underneath it, which we're kind of going towards as curds. I don't know, Alan, your thoughts on this?
Oh, like using bourbon cask, it can be such a difficult thing to do sometimes, because you do get that light color, and a lot of people do buy with their eyes. They look at kind of a more darker, deeper color and think it's a better style of whiskey. Bourbon cask delivers such amazing flavor. Being a bourbon cask, I suppose what people see as an issue, it's a great opportunity. Bourbon cask deliver a different kind of flavor profile than using a sherry, because if you think great American oak trees, they're quite tall, skinny trees. You've got tight rings. So to open up that wood, to actually allow maturation, to allow the liquid permeate through the wood, they're charred, and they're charred quite strongly. And that's what that's doing, is it's opening up the wood, giving an opportunity for the liquid to get through, but it burns a part of the wood, which is called vanillin. And vanillin is what's going to deliver those really nice vanilla. I've seen vanilla pop up there in the notes. It's going to deliver that vanilla note, but it also delivers kind of a burnt sugar, creme brulee, kind of caramel kind of note to it as well. So although it may not, when people look at it, the color doesn't always kind of make somebody go, wow. But then when you get the freshness, the taste of it, it really does just shine. Like for me, even my first week within the distillery, and I was working down in Dingle, the guys, lucky enough, amazing for me, the guys were pulling the samples for this particular whiskey, and I was trying it from the cask at the time, and yet seeing the color kind of went, oh, maybe this hasn't progressed as we might have thought. But the first taste that was getting it at cask strength really just kind of washed over. The smoothness of it, the sweetness of it, those vanillas, those sugars, everything came through. And then taking the Potstilled, like we spoke about it, with that kind of green kind of freshness, it kind of delivers such... even some people call it that kind of sherbety kind of note as well. It really kind of delivered everything into it to kind of give you a real kind of, like we always talk about balance in drinks. It delivers that kind of fresh, kind of fruity, kind of sourness of kind of that citrus, but it also delivers the kind of sweetness as well. So they kind of work hand in hand to deliver just an amazing kind of round palate cleanser, and that creaminess of the Potstilled just washes it right over you.
Absolutely. And Graham, for sample B, I believe it's a 46.5% ABV, the bottling strength. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's our kind of our standard bottling strength, which is, to me, especially whiskies of this age, it's almost probably the ideal strength to drink them at. It takes the edge off definitely takes the edge off the alcohol, but also it rounds the whiskey off, and I think. Also, at 46.5%, you don't have to do this thing called chill filtration, which is basically filtering the whiskey back to being clear again. And so you leave everything in there. Okay, you add water, but hopefully you leave all the other flavors in there, albeit they're a little bit diluted. The other thing as well that we don't add any caramel coloring either. So what you see in all these glasses is natural color.
Is what you get, exactly. And I did see a question whether or not E158 caramel coloring was legal in Irish whiskey, and it is. But obviously, as Graham pointed out, it is not being used in this case. Glynn was wondering, is this the new release? Yes, this is the brand new single pot still batch number 5, which is the final of the batch releases from the. That shows me now. So that's me. That's messing with my ring and I've dropped it on the wooden floor and made an absolute racket. Anyway, that showed me. Yes, as I said, this is the final batch release. I believe as Graham's pointed out, the bottling strength 46.5% ABV. I believe the ORP, Alan, €90 for this expression. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Perfect. Now there's a lot of questions coming through. There's also Doug trying to be funny as well. It's never a good look on Doug, but don't worry about that. But the one question I found quite interesting was I can't find the question here right. The second C, whose name it was, actually David Brady. He's asking, how do you know, I suppose, in the different casks have reached their sweet spot or full maturation when you're tasting through the bourbon cask for this pot still? What do you look for in terms of the whiskey being ready? And while you're saying that, I'm going to nip off camera for 1 second to pick up that ring before the dog eats it. So you start away. I'll be back in 3 seconds.
Okay, I'll let you go off and get your ring.
Got it.
Well done. Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, I think there's this kind of false myth put out that the master distiller stands by every cask waiting for it to ripen, and there's a point in a day where he goes, "Yeah, that's it. It must be bottled." It's not like that. In the early days of Dingle, all the casks were progressing, so they were always developing. But the casks are now reaching an age where they're starting to hit sweet spots at different times. So the bourbon casks are now, for me, coming through at 8 years old, coming through very well, and probably outscoring the sherry cask. So that's not to say that the sherry cask will come back into their own in 2 or 3 years. So there's not really a sweet spot as such. There's moments where you probably think, yeah, that works better than maybe they did a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So it's a bit of a balance, really. You know, we have to release whiskies. We're not fortunate enough to have so much money that we'll keep it all for 12 years old and release it then. So very much now it's about releasing what you think is the best at that given time. And for this one, bourbon cask, to release a bourbon cask, it was probably always going to be with a pot still rather than single malt, because the pot still characters really work well with the bourbon. You've got that herbal and you've got that spice, which works with the nice sweetness from the bourbon. Whereas single malt is probably a little bit behind pot still in its development for like age at this moment in time. But you know, it will come through again. So that's why we tend to use the more dominant casks for the single malt.
Stuart Quayle's asking if it's first or second fill or a mixture of both. Or
question there, first or second fill. So yeah, it's all first fill casks we're using just now. We are backfilling the casks that we empty, but my plan is to keep them for older, so they'll be kept for 12-year-old releases in the future, let's say.
Absolutely. And what I suppose in terms of when you're looking at distilleries, when you're using those casks again, would they be a kind of a 10% of the overall maturation plan, or less or more for those kind of longer maturations?
Yeah, our plan is to only fill casks twice. So if you wind the clock forward 10 years time,
yeah,
the theory is we'd have 50% first fills and 50% second fills. And if we look at what we release, probably 80% of what we release will be 12-year-old or younger, or at least 75% of that. So it kind of works that you can keep your first fills for your younger whiskies, your 8, 10, 12-year-olds, and then for the 12 plus, you can then bring in the second fills. And that's not to say you're bringing in an inferior cask. That, you know, there's a school of thought that a second fill cask at 15-year-old will be better than a first fill, because the first fills have possibly gone too far by then. So that's when it's nice to combine first and seconds together, but keep the first fills for the younger ages.
Absolutely. And is there a particular source you like to use for your bourbon casks? I saw a question coming through there. Or is it from, I suppose, multiple cooperages that you're just looking for grades of barrels rather than a particular source?
Yeah, over the years, the source probably has changed. You know, we've sourced some direct, or well, not possibly direct, but we've sourced some via Speyside Cooperage in Scotland. We also use a cooperage called Riverside Cooperage, who are based in the States. So we're not really big enough to go and chap on the door of a bourbon distiller and say, can we have your casks? We just don't deal in that quantity. So we go through a cooperage and that's beneficial to us because they bring the casks to themselves and then they check them over. And so we're buying distillery select casks, which are generally 100% guaranteed to fill okay without any issues. So in the past, we've seen Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Basil Hayden, and more recently brought in casks from Widow Jane as well. So there's a nice mix, and it's nice to compare them together. And what I'm also seeing as well, there's what aren't really bourbon casks, but they're American whiskey casks that have possibly only been used for 6 or 12 months as well. So there you're getting something which is somewhere between a bourbon cask and a virgin oak style as well. So they're good to fill because you get your whiskey matured quicker. But I like to use them to bleed them in with other casks to maybe take the edge off them as well. So although bourbon casks are all tarred with the same brush and they all come under the same umbrella, they're not. There's vast differences out there.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we start by pouring, or sort of continue with pouring sample C? And Alan, I want to bring you back in and ask what, I suppose, if this is the final release of the series, or the batch series of single pot still, what should we expect, I suppose, from the distillery after this? Because we've met the time of the end for batch releases both now in single malt and pot still. We have a core range single malt that has been mentioned multiple times as too delicious and too easy to drink. What should we expect from the distillery? And I'm going to start pouring sample C now as well.
No matter what. And we have a lot of exciting things to come. As Graham was saying, like we've a lot of stuff coming of age now that we can really play around with things. Through the kind of cask program we've had so far, there's some fantastic bourbon, sherries, ports, even some of our more different casks. Experimental casks are really starting to come of age, and we're starting to see a bit of life in a few things. We do have a very exciting series. So although the batch series has finished, it's not to say that the single or the single releases or the special releases have finished. We do have a brand new series to come that's going to kick off this October, and we internally are very excited about it to bring it to life and to bring it to the world. We're looking at some very kind of pivotal milestones across pagan calendars and looking at kind of matching up to events. So it's going to be really exciting to bring that to life. But the amazing thing about that is where previously we had our single malt batch series, we had our Potstilled series. This is going to be a selection of everything from single malts, Potstills, single casks, some marryings. So it's going to bring a new life to us and give us something way more that we can play with. And also the fact that age statements are going to become a thing as well. We were quite lucky to be the first distillery in Ireland to release a brand new spirit in a long time. So we can still be the first to release age statements as well, be it 10, 12, 15, whatever it may be. Not saying we're doing that, because I know sometimes you say something, people go, oh, he said it, they're doing it. Not saying we're doing that just yet. But we are looking towards it because we want to be able to have those age statements with us and be able to bring them to life and bring them to people to try. We're quite lucky, maybe we get to try things that not many people do, and we start to love it, but we want to bring people that opportunity to try that as well. So there's definitely a lot of exciting things to come, from our new series to age statements to potential single casts down the line. So although we've spoke about, we've brought in our core single malt, the hope is in the next couple of years we're bringing a core pot still. The days of small batch releases, experimenting, and us kind of just having a bit of fun with it are definitely ahead of us. They're not behind us in any way by just finishing off the batch series. Finishing the batch series was just to give an end to something that really helped us grow the distillery, that helped us define what the distillery was and to bring it to life. We had a lot of people that got involved with collecting of it. Some people kind of wish they started collecting earlier, so we wanted to give them an opportunity to get involved as well and bring a new collection that everybody can be a part of.
That I mean, sounds phenomenal and great. I'm glad to hear. I mean, Dingle obviously being some of the forerunners, but also having a lot of fun along the way. So I'm glad to hear that those days aren't over. So in front of me, I do have sample C. I will pre-warn. Graham, can we get an ABV check on this one before people stick their noses in?
This is 59.5%.
Okay, fantastic. And this is the cast strength version of the core release, or sorry, the batch 5 single pot still release that we just tried in sample B, yeah?
Yes. So we increased the quantity that we sold of the cast strength up till now, whether it had been single malt or pot still, there had only been 500 bottles in each release up until these last two releases, the last single malt. So we increased it to 1,000 because there was demand out there for cask strength whiskey and really to taste it in natural form. So hopefully a few more people have been able to source the bottles, and I think the knock-on effect of that is that the good thing is it knocks a bit of the collectability out of it, so people are more willing to open their bottle and actually drink it. Even so that's nice to see, because Dingle suffered in the early from being too collectible, and we're thankfully we're over that hurdle and we're out the other side. Great to see people enjoy it. Hopefully people have kept some of their sample B as well, so they can compare the two together. But sample C at 59.5%, is that the best strength to drink it? Well, probably not. You're probably going to want to add a few drops of water. So this one you maybe want to take off camera yourself and just drop the water in and have a play with it and just see what it's like over the range. You to get from 59.5 down to 46.5. If there's any budding mathematicians out there, they'll work it out. But it's a chunk of water, and you probably wouldn't.
Exactly. For the nearly 10 years I've been working in whiskey, I've had to know the formula of how to reduce that. And for nearly 10 years ago, I built an Excel calculator to do it for me. So I've never remembered it in my head. I'm going to stick my nose into this. I've already seen the Cask Strength Crusade coming up in the comments section. The very healthy and vibrant group of cask strength enthusiasts within the Irish whiskey community.
That's one way to describe them.
Somebody mentioned the M word already.
I don't think he's
there
on
you
tonight.
go.
Mr. Mara watching. I don't think we're saying
I've already seen that nobody should mention Mara as what, and then as soon as I said that, there was about 10 people saying Cask Strength Crusade. So sure, one of the most lively and vibrant voices of the Cask Strength Crusade. This is a phenomenal nose, and it's interesting. I suppose the difference in vibrancy and the difference in character on the nose between the two spirits at 46.5 and 59.5. Was that, am I correct on the ABV there on the second?
Yeah, you have to get beyond the alcohol. That is the downside of high strength whiskey, the alcohol burn. So when you're nosing it, you probably want to just keep your nose a little bit further away from the glass, because as soon as you inhale too much, it will desensitize your senses. So
Exactly.
tread carefully, and it's the same with tasting it. Have a little sip. You don't go too heavy into it. And as I say, that few drops of water just makes a difference. It warms up the whiskey, opens it up a little, and it just becomes a little bit more acceptable to drink. Your mouth won't go numb after 2 or 3 sips.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to have a little sip of this here. Alan, tell me, in years past, one of your famous brand ambassadors, Beardy Dave Cummins, used to be harassed and harangued for the cask strength releases every year with the different releases from Dingle. Now, obviously, you're getting your feet very much into the role of international brand ambassador. Have you experienced the harassing and haranguing of the very passionate Dingle fans that want the cask strength release?
I have seen many examples of it, and I've had numerous people talk to me about their collections, and I've seen photos and pictures, and I've seen some absolutely amazing collections that people have managed to wrangle together over the years. And it's fantastic to see people with such a love and such a graw for something like this. I have got to see a bit of I don't know what you call it, the Beatlemania behind it as well, Dinglemania we might call it. When we actually do get those releases, I've had people asking me. I've been lucky enough in the last 6 months. After Christmas, we really got to get stuck into actually getting out there again, talking to people, doing tastings. It wasn't just online. We've got to do them in person. And I've got to meet a lot of people in person and really kind of see the love that they have for Dingle and see exactly like what people are doing with it, and to see, like I said, their collections and talk to them. And it's been beautiful to do it because, you know, coming into a job like this where you just want to be out, you want to be talking to people, you want to be helping them, and you want to embody the brand. And being stuck at home and not being able to do it was quite difficult. So now that we actually do have the opportunity to do it, it's fantastic. And I'm quite lucky that I'm not just doing it here in Ireland. I'm doing it all over the world. Since we've even started, I've been in the United States, in the UK, in Greece. On St. Patrick's Day, I was over doing an event for the Irish Embassy with the American President Joe Biden was present. So it's amazing to do it and to get to meet people. And like, it's not just the people here in Ireland; it's everywhere. I've met guys in the UK, I've met guys in the US that are getting their stuff sent over, that are really getting into it. And really have a love for everything that we're doing. So it's class. You can see Dave there saying that the phone does go off. Even for the few people I knew, I was getting the phone calls and getting the texts and getting the emails. But I haven't met as many as Dave has. So I probably have a bit of a love for it. And I thought it was quite nice and quite cute. Dave probably had his head wrecked and didn't want to hear any more about it. But it's like to see the fans, the people that are there for Dingle. And like I said, the graw that's there for Dingle. It's amazing. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are fans of a lot of different brands and a lot of different spirits, and it's amazing to see. But to see the love that people have for the Dingle Distillery and what we're doing and the liquids we're producing, it's class. It gives you something to kind of look forward to when you're doing things as well.
Absolutely. And I suppose there were 8,000 bottles released of the 46.5 version. 1,000 bottles released of this cask strength version, which I believe are sold out. If I can be correct on that one, they usually don't hang around for long. I suppose in the world at large, I know that you can order from Irish Malts and the likes of Celtic Whiskey Shop and Foxes who will deliver globally to your door where it is legally allowed to do so. There's my little asterisk. Are there markets that people will be looking for? I know we have a few viewers in Germany who I feel very much in the same way that Beardy Dave was. They always want to know whether or not the releases are available in Germany, so I asked them first. But are there other places around Europe or that will be seeing batch number 5 at 46.5 released?
Yeah, so there is, although we'll say that the cask strength is gone, it is gone in this market. There are 1 or 2 markets still to get it. Now, they're going to get quite small amounts. The majority of it does go in the Irish market. There is some small amounts out there. Even for people in the UK, it still is to come. When you look at the UK, we've got amazing people like the guys in Whiskey Exchange. I was only over 2 weeks ago speaking with the guys in the Sun Tavern, which is a bar in Bethnal Green, but they actually run a shop as well where you can buy their stuff you can buy stuff from them online. In Germany, we work with the guys in Kirsch. In Greece, we've got the guys in Cavantidas. In Belgium, you've got St. Mac Liquor Store. So we've got some really good kind of distributors out there and some really good retailers out there that you might be able to pick something up if you keep an eye out. I'll always say if there's anything particular in another country, if you're trying to find out whether it's been released, if it hasn't released, don't be afraid to reach out. All you're doing is asking a question. I'm sure Dave, as I'm seeing Dave saying, I'm giving them all Alan's number going forward. Maybe I might be regretting this after a while, but yeah, like we're here to try and help as well. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask us as well. We can always advise and tell people and help them along. The great thing as well about where we are right now, we are still to hit a couple of markets with, say, like the single Potstilled 5. But with this new release, as I'm talking about, it's going to be quite particular within celebration of a particular time. So it'll hopefully be a global worldwide release at once. So it'll hit all markets at once, which would be something a very special to do as well. Instead of just drip feeding it out there, as the brand is growing, we'll have this opportunity to bring something to everybody at one time.
Fantastic. You mentioned a lot of very interesting distributors and retailers as well around Europe. You know, Kirsch in Germany obviously doing a fantastic job. Saint Mac in Belgium, Gunter, the owner of the brand there, he's a huge fan of Irish whiskey, so great to see a shout out. And Sun Tavern for myself, I've a great obviously know of Sun Tavern, such a fantastic bar, a great destination bar like Homeboy in London. But I actually had my first experience in Sun Tavern walking in accidentally. A friend of mine asked me, did I want to go to a Calvados bar, that all they sold was Calvados and Perry. And I basically figured it wasn't going to be there the next time I went to London. I didn't think Calvados bars were going to be the next big thing. So I had to go. And we came out of the Calvados bar, had a great time, by the way. It was like a Calvados jazz bar. It was phenomenal. And then went down the street and I said, sure, look, we'll pop into this bar, whatever. It's just that whatever the next bar is. And we popped in and I started looking at the back bar and there's this Irish whiskey and that Irish whiskey. And then I'm like, hang on, everything here is Irish whiskey. And I said to the bartender when I was ordering my drink, I said, you lads have a phenomenal selection of Irish whiskey and put you in. And he just goes, yeah, thanks. Throws down the coaster and just says the Sun Tavern, just logo slides by me. And I felt like an awful agent at that point. But it was it was a phenomenal night.
Yeah, it's amazing to see even like the spread of Irish whiskey right now. You talk about that. You talk about London, the likes of the guys in the Sun Tavern, the guys in Homeboy. They're kind of very based towards the Irish market. You have Milroy's in London, which are just good whiskey fans, and they have fantastic selections across their bars. Like there's bars popping up all over the place that are really kind of championing Irish whiskey, and like the saying is a rising tide floats all ships, and we as an entire industry are working together to get that out there, to work together to get Irish whiskey to the world. I was only a part of a whiskey tasting, Irish whiskey barrel top tasting in the Whiskey Exchange with the likes of the guys from Waterford, from Jay Corrie's, from Irishman, Middleton, Teeling, and like we all see each other at these things and we all get on and we're all there to help each other and advise each other as we go too. Even for myself in this industry for a long time, but new to, we'll say, to the international role. So meeting people along the way, they're there to help and there to advise is fantastic. And we all do work together. And the Irish whiskey is definitely starting to see more life and really get out there into the world, in the on-trade, in the off-trade, like with said the amazing retailers we have out there, even like the Maison de Whiskey in France. It's just fantastic to see, and there's a real interest now.
Absolutely. I see D Finn dropping saying she got a great deal on her Dingle single malt from the boys at Sun Tavern. So clearly doing the Lord's work over there. Alan, I haven't, for anyone that does know me, I also travel for whiskey. I've yet to meet you at an international fair, so I'm going to have to link in with your schedule later on, and we'll have to gallivant around some European capitals and spread the good word of Irish whiskey. Sorry, Graham?
Who are you working for this week?
Listen, right now I'm wearing a lovely Dingle hoodie. You know me, I talk about hoodie. It is actually this one. This one is my I have two hoodies, as you will well know, Faye. I have a navy and a black one in medium and one in small. And I've been trying to work off some COVID weight, and I fit into the small one now, so I'm delighted. So I'm sporting it very, very proudly at the moment. So I'm delighted. One of my favorite hoodies of the industry. I have a favorite T-shirt of the industry, and I have a favorite hoodie, and this is most certainly my favorite hoodie. But I am keeping an eye on the time, and I do want to move on to our final sample D. And I know, Graham, this is something that you are excited to tell us about. So why don't you tell us about what this lovely kind of dark amber rose-colored whiskey is in sample D here?
Yeah, so sample D has nothing in connection with the previous three spirit and whiskey that you've tasted. The first three were Potstilled related. So sample D is single malt. And there's been a few questions in the thread about experimental casks and what we've got or what we're working on or what I'd be interested in doing and what's risky or what's not. Well, there are lots of different casks out there to try, but this one was one that caught my imagination in my previous life when I was at Glenmurray, and the guys that were selling the casks turned up in an SUV with a barrel it was a hogshead in the back of it, and opened the boot and let me sniff the cask. And this cask had travelled all the way from Australia, and I was so impressed with the aroma and how fresh the cask was. They also handed me a bottle of Australian wine at the same time, so that sowed a seed for later. They then appeared in Dingle just before lockdown, just before COVID, and it was at that point it made sense to give their cask a try. So this is a single malt finished in an Australian Cabernet Sauvignon cask from the Barossa Valley. So it's still relatively young, 2016 spirit, and 4 years in bourbon and 2 years now in the Cabernet Sauvignon cask.
The ABV on this before we jump in?
It's still pretty high. It'll be around about 65%. The original casks were filled at 70%, so they were higher ABV casks to begin with, and obviously you lose a bit of strength over the years, and then the interaction with the wine takes the strength down again. Has obviously a dilution effect with the lower strength. So, but still mighty strong and still relatively young as well.
Exactly. I remember actually quite a while ago on your Twitter feed, if anyone doesn't know Graham's famous Twitter feed, I saw you pulling your kind of first cast samples of this and being seeing you being very excited about it, of course, made me very excited to learn more about it. So I'm delighted to be able to stick my nose into this. And before we get people too excited, is this an impending release or a treat for the people who have a pack in front of them?
It's definitely a treat at the moment. It's not on my release radar. I think it's still got a bit of time to go. Only 6 years old, so it'd be nice to let this one at least get the same length of time in the wine cask as it did in the bourbon. So maybe eight years or whatever. But then maybe I'll the other option I have is to transfer it back into bourbon and let it go for a longer distance, which I might do with some. I've got 12 casks, so I can play with permutations on a few of them to see how they go. But it'll never be a huge release anyway, whichever way it goes.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to say Sláinte. Oh, I'm going to have a little sip of this now. I'm going to enjoy this. Smells fantastic. Phenomenal palate. It definitely doesn't drink like it's none of these are cast strength drink like they're 65. That's my first point. Full of flavor, beautiful, well-rounded. That's a phenomenal drop. I can see why people were so excited in the comment section ahead of time.
Yeah, the intensity.
I'm sorry.
The
For
color.
Irish Whiskey Stone Company there, yes, we are in the 65% region of ABV. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out before I went on. Sorry, Graham, please continue.
No, it's just, for me, first time obviously using Australian casks. I never used them before. I've used French Cabernet Sauvignon, but I'm not a wine expert, but I know Cabernet Sauvignon in France is not the same as Cabernet Sauvignon in Australia. They're two quite different drinks. The Australian one, obviously, the grapes are grown in a much different climate, and it's a more robust wine, a more full-bodied wine, I suppose. So it was always going to give quite a hit to the spirit, and I think that has come across. But I would also say this is one whiskey that will not be a favourite to everybody. It will split opinion. There'll be some that will love it and rave about it, and there are others that will just say no, that's not my taste, because it is starting to deviate away from what people expect from a whiskey.
Well, I think I've tasted a lot of Marmite whiskies in my time. I've created some Marmite whiskies in my time. I'm not so sure reading these comments that you've created a Marmite. I'm seeing pretty resounding favoritism towards this release. I did also warn at the top of the show that there's going to be a lot of slagging in between. The Dingle crew are known for having fun. There's been the first positive comment for Doug this evening. There's singing Doug's praises. Shane Keating saying he's a legend, and Mike Ross has come in to say that Doug is a donut. I don't know what that's in relation to, but I felt it was appropriate to bring up. Graham, a question earlier on did come in regards when you were talking about your cask experimentation. And obviously, this is a great example of some of the fun projects you have in the distillery. The question was, what was the most, I suppose, experimental cask that you've got to play with? You can interpret that as you like it. But that was the question. I don't unfortunately remember the person's name who asked, but in your, I suppose, bag of tricks, both in Dingle and Glenmurray, what, I suppose, kind of piqued your interest or was of left field? What was, I suppose, in your opinion, the most experimental cask you had to play with?
If you're talking in previous history, previous life, the one that got me in most trouble was a cider cask. So I tried that in Scotland, and I was stretching the rules, or maybe it was a bit like Boris. I didn't quite understand the rules. Anyway, I played that card. For me, that was interesting, and I think it worked. I still fight that corner that cider cask is when it's done well, it can work. But when I came to Dingle and inherited high quality stock in the warehouse, and I've said before, the backbone was bourbon, sherry, port. So what I've done in the two and a bit years I've been there, I've really just widened that portfolio. So I wouldn't say I've done anything too dramatic, too experimental, but within that time, brought in obviously wine casks from Australia, Spain, also going a little bit more peculiar, I suppose, not peculiar, but mezcal, tequila. And I'll say that I'm maybe not a fan of those casks. I've never really seen them take over the world yet, but you can't knock them till you try them. So I have got a few of those. Rum as well. I've got some rum casks. So just trying to say widen the portfolio that we've got within Dingle, but also maintaining that backbone, because we need a structure going forward. But it is the 10% of casks that I play around with, they are the most fun, because you really don't know what you're going to get from them.
Absolutely. I suppose there's a lot of questions coming in, and I am keeping an eye on time here. In terms of casks you'd like to play around with, is there anything on the checklist that you haven't got to yet?
Yeah, I haven't tried different woods really. There's obviously there are different oaks out there that can be tried. Obviously European, Spanish, French, American oak I've tried, but we can go further afield, Japanese and various other oaks within the world. So that's something to try. As I say, I've never tried that in my career in making whiskey. So that I think that would be my next stop.
Okay, and there's a few questions.
Some Calvados casks. So if anybody out there has some Calvados casks, I'm in negotiation with some suppliers to try and get. I want to go straight to the source if I can, because you can build a relationship then and hopefully continue that in the future.
Absolutely. I've had the privilege of working with young and old Calvados casks and made a few mistakes myself. So I'll give you a call after the show, and not that I can teach you much, but I see one question in relation, well, not relation, but a cousin to Calvados, going back to cider. There was a question saying that they wanted to see more, or at least Irish whiskey in cider casks. There have been a few in the market, or one or two. There are obviously different types of cider. There's sweet cider, sugar forward, dessert, tannic. Is in your mind, having, I suppose, some experience in it, is there things that a style that could be done better, or did you Do you think that some companies are nailing it with a tannic one or a sweet one, or is there something you think that works best for those cider casks? Obviously, a low ABV drink in it to begin with, so it's an interesting cask.
Yeah, I think the one that works, or certainly maybe the safest bet, is a sweet cider with a high ABV, because generally the casks that work with whiskey or spirit are those things that are sweet or lend a sweetness. As soon as you bring in something that is tannic, or you're going to add more tannins or dryness, then it will tend to polarize opinion. It takes that refreshing sweetness away from the whiskey. So not to say it won't work, but it would probably appeal to a smaller audience. But there are, as you said, there's so many different styles of cider that it's a great, interesting thing to investigate and see what impact it is. And we do have very good ciders in Ireland on our doorstep, so we can extend with them.
Exactly. I want to say that if anyone was doubting that Alan was in the Dingle Whiskey Bar, that was the Lewis bell dinging as it went by the front door.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you might see my head turn when somebody goes to walk in. I'm like, what?
Exactly.
He's just missed.
Exactly. No, I am keeping an eye on time. We will wrap this up very quickly. Alan, I just want to ask you, in terms of plans for the distillery going forward. Obviously, it was huge news, I suppose, a few months back that planning permission has in place to create Dingle Distillery 2.0. I know that there's really exciting plans that involve kind of taking down the current building, rebuilding a distillery in its place. I have no idea how you're going to do that. Are the stills coming out? Are you building around the stills? There was talk about a sump area where you're going to have room for perhaps more stills in future. There was a castle tower of some point or some sort mentioned as well. Why don't you tell us quickly about what the plans are for the distillery going forward?
Yes, so we have received our plan permission. We're just finishing off in the final processes of it. There were one or two kind of questions raised by people in the locality in Dingle, and we're just kind of working with them to make sure that all their kind of worries are taken care of and they can understand what's going on. So we have had our plan of permission. We're just at the appeal phase right now, so we'll hopefully find out soon enough. I suppose one of the really good things, one of the great things is that we've actually hit our kind of production capacity. With our 5 washbacks, it only allows us to make so much, we'll say, whiskey per week. And that kind of does start to hinder us when we're looking towards the future and we're looking at progression. We need more and more liquid to be able to do more and more whiskey. So the plan will be that at some point this year, we'll have everything approved. We will close the distillery for a period of time, about 6 months for production, about a year for visitors. But the great thing is that if anybody here has been to the distillery, we have been doing tours. But pre-COVID, we were doing tours, but it was quite difficult as a fully productive distillery and fully working distillery. So we will be putting in the ability to, we will run tours for whiskey and for gin. So people will be able to come. They'll have actually catered tours for whiskey and gin. We'll have a full visitors experience. We'll be adding in a bar, which will actually have a terrace, which will overlook Dingle Bay, which will be amazing to sit down and have a drink on. And we're going to hopefully work with the bars in the town on that as well, and building menus and looking at the options that we can have for people for drinks. We have no plans right now to be adding stills. We'll leave the ability that we can add stills, but the stills aren't really our production issue right now. It is the washbacks, so there will be more washbacks going in. We might finally be able to do something with that mash tun, so we don't have to jump in it twice a day to clean it out. But we want to. The main thing for us really is holding on to the character that is Dingle Distillery. Holding on to that, what we have, like, we pride ourselves in being hand cut from the edge. Everything we do by hand, and we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose the character that we have, that the distillery has. Started out as a small blue galvanized shed, and we want to bring that to the future and bring that to everybody and bring that forward and not lose that made us us. So I'll tell people, keep your eyes peeled. There are no castle or towers going into it. We will have a beautiful centerpiece that people will see when it is built. That'll make the still shine as you drive past on the road. The guys are going to be busy. Put it this way, the guys are going to be busy. Keep polishing them all the whole time as well. So we might love it. They might not love it as much. But it's definitely going to be something exciting for us to bring, and for us to actually bring Dingle to that next level as well, to have those visitor experience, to be able to welcome everybody in. So hopefully by late 23, 24, we'll be able to do that and welcome everybody in with big hugs and show you actually our new life and our tours and everything else.
Fantastic. I see Paul O'Brien in the comments saying he's going to hold off on a visit. I say, no, Paul, you visit now and in 23. Well, I don't see what this has anything to do with holding off. You obviously have to see it before it changes. You have to be one of those people that in 20 years' time would say, I remember when this was I was here when this was small now, right? But no, absolutely fantastic. Thank you for giving us the insight. I'm terribly saddened that I can't Rapunzel my way out of a fairy tale tower into the wash still. But look, that sounds phenomenal. Graham, you must be very excited for that coming down the line as well.
Yeah, it's a big step. It's future-proofing the distillery for the next 15, 20 years. And, it's exciting to be able to do that. My previous existence at Glenmurray, we expanded production by threefold. Even without adding stills, we'll be able to at least double our production. So that helps us plan for the future. Look 10, 20 years ahead. So it's great. And then the distillery is such a strong thing for the town now, and hopefully it will be an attraction in its own right. People will come to Dingle to visit the distillery in itself.
Exactly. And I do want to ask before you go, obviously, Graham, you are joined by your lovely wife, Faye, who is instrumental in also getting all of these phenomenal kits not only assembled, but out to all the correct people all across the world. In that 20, 30-year time frame of the distillery down the road, when you finally decide to retire, you get to retirement age, you've come from the lovely town of Elgin in Scotland. You're now in Dingle. I know when you first moved, I remember speaking to you on a live stream, and Faye was very excited about all the restaurants and the liveliness of the town in Dingle, and I'm sure yourself as well. Is that a town you could see yourself in the future, or are we going to lose you to Spain or Portugal or the United States or something in as I said, in 30 years time when we get to retirement age?
Yeah, when I reach 60 in 30 years time. Yeah, no, we've no plans to run anywhere very quickly. We couldn't run anywhere quickly, and I think Doug Ledden's offered to look after us in our old age and wipe bums. So I'm going to take him up on that. He's quite hyped for wiping my bum anyway.
Well, it's great to hear that he'd be looking after you, and I'm glad you're having a great time in Dingle. It's been fantastic. I'm sure for the team to have you, but for me to have you on this live stream. In the comment section, do let us know what has been your favorite of the spirits you've tasted tonight, A through D. It's always great to see because, of course, everyone's tastes are subjective and different. Alan, if we are looking online to see more about the distillery, jump on to see more about the building itself, the whiskies, where to get them. Do you have socials, website we can hit up to see where to find out more information?
Yeah, well, you can follow everything through the Dingle Distillery. We're on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We all love a bit of Twitter down in Dingle. Graham is a Twitter warrior. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on in the distillery, you can see everything there. If you want to keep up to date on, we'll say, the travels that I'm going through, you can find myself just under Alan Glynn. You can see what we're getting involved in and what we're doing. We're quite active on the social side things as well. We like to let people know what we're doing. We like to get people to see things. So you can definitely check us out there. And like I said, if there's anybody, we're lucky to be a small little family business, so we treat everything that way. If anybody ever has any questions, any quandaries, anything else, don't be afraid to reach out to us. And thanks very much for everybody for joining us tonight. And a big thank you to Faye and Sarah for putting together the kits. We've seen the people saying it constantly in the chat. We better say it ourselves. But thanks very much to Faye and Sarah. They get their head wrecked every time these things have to happen, but they always pull it out of the bag and do an amazing job with it. So thanks very much. And thanks so much for everybody, Matt, yourself, for coming on, joining us tonight and getting to explore this with us. And hopefully everybody's enjoyed it. And like Matt said, let us know what your favorite one was.
And Graham, I don't know, you've had a number of shout outs for your Twitter. I don't know if you're fearful or excited to share any Twitter handles, but I'll leave that up to yourself as well. And to echo the thanks to both Alan and yourself for the evening. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I think people have been very excited to taste these whiskies and have the chance to try the new make Potstilled as well. I think I've tried a lot of things coming from Dingle over the years, but this is a first for me for new make Potstilled. So that was a very exciting part for me.
No, thank you everyone. Thanks to everyone for supporting Dingle so far, and hopefully the future's bright. And definitely come and see us in about a year and a half time, and we'll be able to look after you very well. Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, and everyone in the comments has been sipping along or watching along with us. You've been absolutely fantastic. I hope you have a lovely evening and good night.
Good night to you all. Slánta.